Stream coming to you from Dillsburg, Pennsylvania. This is Chris once again on today, Monday, May 25th, 2020, Memorial Day, Memorial Day here in the United States of America. Today I thought I'd do a special live stream to recognize our fallen who've fallen in service to the nation in uniform for the United States throughout our history. Talk a little bit about the history of Memorial Day and just welcome you all in here. So thanks for tuning in with me today. I'm going to switch over to a little bit better microphone right now and make sure everybody can hear me there. Looks like the sound is okay. William, thanks for coming in. Glad to see you there. Mike, thanks for coming in. Oh, you've sent your greetings ahead of time. I think Mike may not be with us. He might have just posted that ahead of time. But for those who have tuned in, thank you so much for tuning in today. A little bit different focus, not so much today on Africa, but more talking about the United States. We can raise topics about Africa if you're interested in doing that, though. But anyway, folks, welcome in. Once again, this is Chris here with Indaba Africa, and I'm here today to talk to you about Memorial Day, a U.S. federal holiday. So for those who are unfamiliar with Memorial Day, there are many pieces of imagery associated with, hey, Nicholas, welcome there. Good to see you. There are many things affiliated with it. For instance, and there's Wesley, welcome aboard. In addition to, of course, recognize our fallen dead, of course, famously, poppies are associated with Memorial Day. And it is a day that is the unofficial beginning of summer season here in the United States. It marks the beginning of the summer season, although it's still a spring day technically. It's towards the end of the academic year for universities. Some universities would normally have already concluded for their academic year. Others would conclude by the first week of June. And for most public schools around the country, students finish their schooling the last week of May or the first week of June and then go on summer vacation. So Memorial Day has long served as the official holiday. It's certainly since the United States government made it a federal holiday in 1967. It took effect in 1971 as a federal holiday to provide a three-day weekend to federal workers. Now, having served in the military, I was very fortunately to serve in uniform, and oftentimes, especially overseas, for Memorial Day, we were able to get a four-day weekend. And so Memorial Day for me has often been a time then I've been able to not just reflect on the loss of Americans from service in uniform, but also a great opportunity for me to travel. As a consequence, I've seen Austria, the Alps, Switzerland, Italy, the Netherlands, everywhere in Germany you can think of, including Bavaria. And so, yeah, so that it's worked out to be a very fortunate event for me, Memorial Day weekend, that is, not just for remembrance, but also for the ability to travel and see things. And so when I was stationed in Europe, I always took great advantage of it. Normally here in the U.S., people will travel for the weekend. Many will go to cemeteries to see their family members who've passed away in conflict or those who died in uniform. And many others will go to the beach or for barbecues and things like that. So there's Joe. Hey, Joe, coming on from just having our stream just a few moments ago on the Joe Show, Joe Emilio, an American comedian based in South Africa. We were just talking about 9/11, which Joe set up, and I assumed he was doing it because it was Memorial Day, but it was purely happenstance. So it worked out quite well. So if you were able to catch Joe's stream, the Joe Emilio Show, or the Joe Show, we talked about 9/11 and some of the events associated with it. And now I'm going to talk about Memorial Day. So welcome aboard, folks, once again. This is Chris with Indaba Africa talking to you today about Memorial Day. Now, it's important to talk about this holiday for a lot of reasons. Throughout the history of the holiday, which has a very multi-claim effort, there are many different places claim that they're responsible for the actual holiday. But it wasn't a federal holiday as such that exists today until the 1967 Act, and it became effective in 71. Prior to that, back in history, after the Civil War ended, that became the first major conflict. In fact, it's the largest number of people who have ever died in conflict for the United States, with about 775,000 fatalities during the conflict in total between the North and South. So that conflict became one of the first where we actually needed large national cemeteries to bury so many dead. And actually, that conflict cost us 2.38% of our population. Think about that. 755,000 people died in that war with a population of just over 31 million, 31.5 million. So it was 2.38% of our population. Of course, when you take it as males, it's a much higher figure as a percentage of males in the country who passed away as a result of that conflict. So in the aftermath of that, beginning as early as 1868, folks started celebrating in the late spring as flowers were in bloom, the fallen dead, reciting prayers and going to cemeteries where the dead were buried from the Civil War. Eventually, this became known as Decoration Day, and Decoration Day later became more formally known by many as Memorial Day. Now, interestingly, the South, many states in the South celebrate Memorial Day on different dates, and I'll talk about that here shortly. But as a federal holiday, it has been in effect since 1971 with passage of legislation from 1967. And it is formally the day that we recognize and honor and mourn for military personnel who died while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Now, I should mention that there are 3 holidays related to the military specifically here in the States. So there is, of course, Memorial Day, and that is the day we celebrate today for the fallen. There is Armed Forces Day, which is an unofficial holiday, but is a holiday to recognize and honor those currently serving in uniform. So this is the first year, 2020, in which I am not a serving member of the Armed Forces, either on active duty or the reserve component, for the first time since 1983. That's the last time I wasn't serving in the military. So it's a new experience for me, Armed Forces Day, but it is a day that most people are unaware of. It does celebrate and recognize those members currently serving in uniform. And we just had that takes place earlier this month. And then, of course, there's Veterans Day. That's the day that we celebrate and recognize the service of all veterans, and that includes those who died, those who simply served their term of service, those who served in combat. All of those veterans are recognized on November 11th each year. Now, Memorial Day is the last Monday of the month. This year, just coincidentally, Memorial Day coincides with Africa Day. For those in Africa, today is Africa Day. It's the date designated by the Organization African Unity, which is the first multilateral institution for the continent that came about in 1963, I believe. They designated a day to recognize Africa. So today is Africa Day, but it just happens to be the same day that Memorial Day is celebrated here in the U.S. this year. So my focus is not Africa Day, folks. It is on Memorial Day. But those are the 3 holidays. Now, for most people from Commonwealth countries in the Western world who participated in the First World War, November 11th is known as Remembrance Day. The 11th day, the 11th hour, the 11th month is when the armistice took effect to end the First World War. And so in recognition of that, most Commonwealth countries recognize that as Remembrance Day. And in fact, when I was in Ethiopia, even there we recognize Remembrance Day, the diplomatic community, because Allied soldiers are buried in the cemetery there, those who fought to free the Ethiopians from the yoke of Italian fascism. So we celebrate that as Veterans Day to recognize veterans, not as Remembrance Day. So Remembrance Day, if you want to have something akin to that for the United States, would be today. Today would be Remembrance Day, or Memorial Day, to recognize those who've fallen in the service of their nation. Excuse me. So on Memorial Day, each year at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, well, I probably do it across the country, it's at 3 p.m. each place, but here in Eastern Standard Time at 3 p.m., the country recognizes a moment of silence, and we pause to remember those who've fallen. So I did want to start this stream at that time, and as it was, I was on Joe's stream anyway. So on Joe's stream, we kindly took a moment to take that moment to pause and recognize those who passed away in service to the nation. So I did the stream after that so we could talk about it and not pause, but it's just important for people to know that is the case. That has been the case since 2000. Before 9/11, when the Congress passed the National Moment of Remembrance Act, asking people to stop and remember at 3 p.m. those who've fallen. So another interesting thing about Memorial Day, for many people who don't know this, both Americans and abroad, is that Memorial Day is unusual in that in the morning, the flag is raised to the top of the mast to raise the flag to full staff, and then it is lowered to half staff. And then at noon, it's raised back up to the top. And that's a way of recognizing those who've fallen, but also showing the resilience of the nation as we keep the flag flying at the top of the mast. It's kind of an unusual situation, but we've been doing that for a long time now. Now, I mentioned poppies, and poppies are important from a standpoint. Okay, let me get some comments here before I get to the poppies. There's the wizard in Delmas. Beth, hey Beth, thanks for being there. I think I might watch this tomorrow with my daughter, doubling down her international knowledge. That's fine, Beth. Rangers in Hoodsprit in Popo. Okay, in Popo, cool. Paulie, happy Memorial Day. Thank you, Kyle. Good to see you there. Sean, enjoy your Memorial Day. Thank you, Sean. I did lawn work and research and the stream today. I didn't go out and barbecue. I'm maintaining my social distance despite the fact that I take great umbrage with the implementation of it here in Pennsylvania. Nonetheless, I'm following the rules. Nicholas, a day never to forget. Yes. Let me get back to this discussion. So poppies. So what happened, for those who don't know the story of poppies and why poppies are affiliated with Remembrance Day in November and with Memorial Day here in the U.S., is that in 1915, following the Second Battle of Ypres in Belgium, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, who was a physician with the Canadian Expeditionary Force, crafted the poem. He wrote the poem In Flanders Fields. And in that poem, he talks about the poppies blowing in the breeze that were around the soldiers' graves. In 1918, inspired by that poem, the YWCA worker, that's a Young Women's Christian Association, YWCA worker Moina Michael attended a YWCA Overseas War Secretaries Conference, and she wore a silk poppy pinned to her coat. And she gave them to a dozen or 2 dozen of those present so they could also wear them. In 1920, as a consequence of this happening, the National American Legion adopted it as their official symbol of remembrance. And so since 1920 in the United States, the poppy has been recognized for Memorial Day for remembrance of our fallen in combat. For those who don't know, the total number of Americans who died in combat is just under 700,000 in all our conflicts to date. I don't usually recommend Wikipedia, not that it's a bad source of information, but some pages aren't always well kept. But there's a very good page in Wikipedia which covers those who died in America's wars, and you'll see that's quite a long list of wars there. But the top conflicts in which we've lost our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, Merchant Marine in conflict in our history have been, of course, the Civil War with 755,000 fallen, the Second World War with 405,399 combat deaths, the First World War with 116,516. And remember, the United States didn't enter the First World War until essentially 1918. It was nearly over, yet we lost 116,000 soldiers. Vietnam with 58,209 soldiers, the Korean conflict, or Korean War, with 36,574, and the American Revolution came in sixth with 25,000 deaths. But it's rather significant because it was 1% of our population. The total population of the United States during the American Revolution was just 2.5 million. So 25,000 was a pretty significant number, and it was even larger as a percentage than those we actually lost during the Civil War, our bloodiest conflict, with over 700,000 fatalities in conflict. Yes, Nicholas, in England they call it Poppy Day, that's right. And we celebrate it for the same reason, because that Canadian officer who was a physician wrote in Flanders Fields, and that remains with us to this day in the Western world, and that's why we celebrate it. We don't call Poppy Day here. In fact, I think a lot of people who buy the poppies to donate money and wear it on that day don't even know the reason and the significance behind why we do it, but that's quite all right. It remains in those of us who know about it to share it with our brethren and with our brothers and sisters so they understand why people wear the poppy and what it's all about. The war to end all wars is where this came out of, from the Second Battle of Ypres in Belgium in 1915 with Macrae's In Flanders Field poem. And then, of course, the young lady who, working for the YWCA, went to a conference and then wore it and distributed it, and that inspired the American Legion to make it its symbol of remembrance. So the origins of Memorial Day are quite controversial. There are lots of myths, and most of them are unsupported by evidence. But there are at least 25 locations in America that claim to be the origin for the celebration of what now is Memorial Day, or what was known for a long time as Decoration Day. Now, one we can definitely document that's definitely true is on the 5th of May, 1868, less than 3 years after the Civil War ended, General John Logan, who was a very famous politician, a congressman, a senator, and served in the Mexican-American War, but then became a general in the Union Army during the Civil War. He issued a proclamation calling for Decoration Day to be observed annually and nationwide. Now, why is that important? Because General Logan was, I believe, the third commander of the Grand Army of the Republic. Now, it wasn't an army. The Grand Army of the Republic, or the GAR, was a Civil War Veterans Association for veterans to join, similar in function to things like the American Legion or the Veterans of Foreign War that we have in America today. But the Grand Army of the Republic was formed for Union veterans after the war to get together to remember the conflict, to help each other. It was a social organization called the Grand Army of the Republic. And he was its third commander, if I'm not mistaken. But General Logan came out with this proclamation calling for Decoration Day. And that's one of the origins. And that one actually can be documented because there's actually paper behind it. But the name Memorial Day, the first time that we have any kind of record of it, wasn't until 1882 when that term became more common. And as I said, it didn't become federal law until 1967 and took effect in 1971. Let's see what else can we say about this here. I made some notes here to make sure I didn't forget some things that I want to share with you guys. So this is what General Logan said. This is his proclamation. The 30th of May, 1868 is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. That was his proclamation in 1868, calling for Decoration Day, which today is Memorial Day. So it does go back quite a ways. Now, initially, the event was to celebrate, recognize, and honor and mourn those who'd fallen in the American Civil War. but it eventually extended to all of our conflicts, including the next major conflict, aside from wars with Native Americans, became the Spanish-American War in 1898, and going on from there. Now, as I mentioned, some southern states in the U.S. actually celebrate their own Memorial Day, and it's a little bit different. So for this year, in fact, it's already taken place. Sunday, April 26th, Florida celebrated Memorial Day as a state holiday. And then in Alabama, it was on April 27th, Georgia and Mississippi on May 11th, and also in parts of South Carolina on May 11th. So that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different southern states still celebrate Memorial Day in their own fashion to recognize the Confederate dead who died in the American Civil War. So when countries talk about reconciliation and remembrance and getting along, and we look at South Africa, for instance, and the end of apartheid and how some people just can't get along and move beyond events, look at the United States. It has been well over, what is that, 65, that's 45, 55, it's about 170 years since the end of the Civil War, 100, yeah, something like that. And we still have states celebrating Memorial Day in a different fashion owing to their origin in the Confederacy. So not condemning them, I'm just making a point. Now, another important aspect of Memorial Day is that we shouldn't just think about the veterans who've fallen in combat, but also we should think about those who are missing in action. And so as of May of this year, this month, the Defense POW, Prisoner of War, and MIA, Missing in Action Accountability Agency, the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, says that 81,900 Americans are still considered missing in action. 72,598 soldiers from World War II, 7,580 from the Korean War, 1,587 from Vietnam, 126 during the course of the Cold War, and 6 from conflicts since 1991 are missing in action. In 1979, Congress declared that the third Friday in September would be National POW MIA Recognition Day. Starting in 1982, the day became POW MIA Flag Day, or flag, excuse me. In 1982, that's when they started flying the POW MIA flag over the White House, just below the American flag. It's the only other flag to ever do that. In 98, Congress mandated that the flag also be flown on other holidays like Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Veterans Day, which makes sense. But in November of 2018, most recently, it became mandatory to fly the flag at select federal sites year-round, including the White House and memorials like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and World War II Memorial. So we never forget those we've lost and we cannot find from our conflicts. To date, that's 81,900 Americans who've disappeared or are missing in action or were prisoners of war that were never repatriated. It's quite a solemn thing to think about that. Let me see some of the comments over here, ladies and gentlemen, before I start bringing up. I'm going to put pictures up for you guys. The first one here, hopefully you'll find this interesting. This is the American Cemetery in Carthage in Tunisia, where I was once stationed. So I thought I would show that to you guys. Take a look at that. Whoops. Back up there. All right, let me see some of the comments over here now. They never forget about the flag. Are you still always asking Paulie that? Okay, Alicia, once again, very inspiring to listen to you, intellectual story. Well, thank you, Alicia. It's very kind of you. Thank you. You notice I'm a little more sedate and calm today when I'm talking about events. Out of respect for those who've fallen, I've had colleagues of mine, comrades who've fallen in combat. It's a rather sad thing. It's unfortunate that we have conflict, but sadly it becomes necessary at times. Kyle, let's see. Kyle's there. Welcome, Kyle. Matt, long live Francis Scott Key. Yeah, that's right. The Yep. All right. What have I missed here? You guys are talking to each other. Cool. That's great. Yeah, we have some. Hank has asked a question. Do we have a lot of U.S. burial sites around the world then? No, actually we don't, Hank. The Commonwealth has far more cemeteries around the world. We have one in Africa. It's located in Tunisia at Carthage, and this is for those who died in the campaign when we went into North Africa, Operation Torch, which continued on, and most of those who passed away actually passed away in Tunisia in conflict with the Desert Fox's army, although he had left Tunisia by that time, had been recalled back to Germany because Hitler knew that the Africa Corps was going to be abandoned and they would all wind up being prisoners. And they didn't want Rommel to fall prisoner to the West. So they had him fly out for meetings knowing that the end was in sight. But we lost a number of American service members in that conflict in North Africa. So this is our only cemetery. And there's an organization known as the American Battle Monuments Commission, which hires federal employees that run these these cemeteries and memorials for us around the world. But the majority of them are located in Europe and France in particular. We have several in France from the First World War, and most of them are from that time frame. Now, the reason we don't have them around the world is because we've been able to repatriate the remains of most of our fallen throughout our history. It's been one of the major focuses for us. And as motor transport became available, it became a far easier prospect. Now, one place that's definitely a problem for us and why it's hard to find some of those who are missing in action is in North Korea, because when we crossed 38th parallel, chasing the North Koreans towards the Yalu River, and MacArthur got overzealous and even had some advanced units, reconnaissance units, go over the Yalu. They reached the Yalu. China reacted and sent massive number of forces pouring into North Korea. At the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, the Marines and Task Force Smith were overwhelmed, and a lot of soldiers were buried in temporary hasty graves, expecting that we could come back and collect them later, but we've never returned. And so many soldiers and Marines were lost, and we've never recovered them as a consequence. North Korea is not exactly the easiest country to work with, and so we still have many people, but we have only a few. When I lived in Italy, not too far from Vicenza, near Asiago, famous for its cheese, is a Commonwealth cemetery. And I've gone up there. I took my soldiers up there as part of remembrance around Memorial Day to remind them of the consequences of conflict and the cost of it. So the British actually have a far more extensive Commonwealth system of graveyards around the planet, and many of their conflicts came before refrigeration, air transport, and things like that, which is how we normally are able to repatriate the remains of our fallen. So not a lot of ours around the world, but one in Africa and several in France. The story behind the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, just briefly, is that this is a soldier who was recovered from the battlefield and were unable to identify the soldier and then buried in there. And the idea is to pay respect to all the soldiers whose remains could not be identified. Now, until recent history, that was the norm oftentimes. Very interesting story with Matthew Broderick, the actor. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's done a lot of things, war games. He's married to Sarah Jessica Parker, the one from Sex and the City. But Matthew Broderick, he was on the Who Do You Think You Are genealogy show, and they traced his family ancestry to a cemetery near Atlanta, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. He had an uncle from the Civil War who served, I think, in the Connecticut, a unit based in Connecticut, a regiment there, and he died and disappeared in the Civil War, and they didn't know where he was at. Well, if I recall correctly, watching that show, what happened is that they helped him trace his family history. And what happened is they went to a cemetery and where they did research and checked on battle records and where people were buried and what happened and in unit logs and muster rosters, things like that. And they're able to trace down his ancestor was actually the only person left who was an unknown soldier in this cemetery near Atlanta, Georgia, this veteran from Connecticut. And because of Matthew Broderick and because Hollywood did this program, that soldier, his remains have now been identified, and his family, over 100 plus years later, can know what happened to him and where he died at. So these days with DNA, we can do an awful lot to determine remains. But in the case of Matthew Broderick, they were able to identify this. It's quite amazing story. But if you remember in the past, it's very difficult to identify remains. The photograph I have up there, reducing my size, that photograph is from the American Cemetery in Carthage, which is a beautiful location. And you see there, Marine Gunny Sergeant from the embassy. This was the day I was promoted to Major in 2001, that photograph. And this is a beautiful mosaic along the wall there. And the person in the center there is Colonel Christine Crosby, who was the defense attaché, and she's the one that pinned on my rank as Major that day. But that shows the Operation Torch and moving towards Tunisia. Where the U.S. flag is at in that photograph is actually Tunisia on that map. And above it, or to the slight right, you can see Sicily above their heads. But that flag runs up and down parallel to where Tunisia is and where the U.S. forces went through there. So very beautiful location. These American cemeteries are absolutely amazing. One of the most famous ones, of course, is Normandy from the Second World War. If you ever get there to Normandy, you must go to the American Cemetery. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is me, the day I was promoted to Major, and that is next to the grave of a Congressional Medal of Honor, Nicholas Minuet, who had a German concern named after him, a military base for the U.S. Army in Germany, and that's why I recognize that. So I found his grave, and that's where I was promoted to Major in Carthage, Tunisia, in 2001. Seems like a long time ago. Yeah, Joe, that is a lot of missing in action, 81,000. Of course, most of those are from the Second World War, and you can imagine a fair number of those are in places like Kwajalein, Bikini Atoll, Iwo Jima, probably out on these island hopping campaigns, and also from ships that were out of contact that may have been sunk or submarines, and no one's ever recovered. So not so many from Europe, but some also from Europe, but mostly it's people in the Pacific from the Second World War. But that's the vast majority of those who are missing is the Second World War. Matt says, do the U.S. embassies close today? Yes, they were. No, I'm sorry. Joe says it. Yeah, the embassies are closed today. It's a federal holiday. So our embassies abroad celebrate and recognize federal holidays because they're federal institutions. And also, normally they're closed on local national holidays. So in some countries, it's a really good deal. If you work at an embassy, you get a lot of days off. But of course, usually the days off aren't days off. So for instance, today, I can imagine that in Addis Ababa, the defense attaché and others who serve in uniform there were most likely at the Commonwealth Cemetery to celebrate Memorial Day, even though there's not American there. But yeah, it's a day off. The American embassies are closed around the globe on this day. Sloat, welcome aboard. Good to see you there. Look like Howard Stark. Nicholas, freedom gleaned from blood, guts, determination, commitment, many missing. Yeah, it is really sad. What's the story behind it? I already answered that question, I think. My respect for 45 increased immensely when he repatriated the fallen from People's Republic of North Korea. Yeah, we actually have a branch of the U.S. military that's a joint command that's based in Hawaii that's responsible for repatriating the remains of the American fallen. One of the things that should give soldiers and sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen comfort is that in times of conflict, the U.S. military will never forget you and will never leave you behind. Even if we can't get back to an area, you will not be forgotten. Your case will be left open, and people will consistently try to repatriate you for your loved ones and your progeny so that they know what happened to you and put an end to speculation and concern. We spend millions, tens of millions of dollars on this process each and every year, making this happen. And the people who do it are amazing experts in forensics, genetics, and also anthropology. And so places they go most frequently you hear about are Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, Laos, looking for Americans and repatriating their remains. They've been doing this for decades. They're quite amazing. When I was in Tunisia, I can't think of the name of the command right now, I'm drawing a blank, but when I was based in Tunisia, the power station in Tunisia, which is in a small bay inlet that comes into the center of town, was going to expand. So they needed more space. They didn't have the land, but the water is shallow. So they brought dredging equipment in. They started, dredging. They put up pilings to block it off, and they drained the water and they started dredging the soil. And poof, they ran into a bomber, a U.S.-built bomber. It was B-24, perhaps. I can't remember exactly. But they ran into a bomber, and as they're digging through it, they found field manuals. Now, this water was not something where it was oxidated, so things were protected. But they pull out and says a training manual for this aircraft, an American-built aircraft. So they contacted the embassy, and they contacted the British embassy because we did a lot of Lend-Lease, and so other forces also flew our aircraft. And they thought it was initially a British Lend-Lease aircraft, but it turned out it was actually an American bomber crew that had gone missing during the campaign. And what happened is that they actually crashed right within sight where this power plant was built, and no one ever knew it. And the plane sank under the water. The commander was a major, U.S. Army major, because remember, there's no Air Force then, it was the Army Air Corps. And so the major and his crew, their bodies were found in 2000, and they were repatriated, and their families were notified, and they were brought back for a dignified burial to the United States. It's that kind of commitment on the part of our Department of Defense that is heartwarming. I mean, no one wants to wind up being someone who's lost or be missing in action, but we don't give up, we don't forget. And so that's a very heartwarming thing. It's unfortunate that we have over 81,000, nearly 82,000 service members who are still missing. As I said, the majority from the Second World War, but they are not forgotten. And so that's why I mentioned POW and MIA flag and that event, because I think that's important for folks to know about. It's not something that a lot of people do know about. But so that's when I got promoted to major. I don't know, what do you guys think about that? Any comments on that? I look like Howard Stark. Now, I guess that's one comment. Any other comments? I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a bit of a mustache on there. So that's that's from a long time ago. So the image that people are most familiar with when it comes to Memorial Day is we frequently think of Arlington National Cemetery. Arlington National Cemetery, there's an image of it right there, and those are the gravestones for veterans. They don't have to be those who died in conflict. Any soldier can be buried there. You just have to apply for it and get permission. The problem, of course, is Arlington is running out of physical space because so many veterans are buried there. So On this day, we recognize our fallen, of which many in that cemetery are the fallen from service in uniform, but others who also died after their service. Arlington is interesting because Arlington was actually the property of Robert E. Lee. It was his farm on the west side of the Potomac. And of course, when the southern states went in rebellion, Robert E. Lee was leading the Army of Northern Virginia shortly after the conflict started. And so Union troops occupied and confiscated his farm, and it was never returned to the Lee family. So to this day, that land is now used as the Arlington National Cemetery, where we bury our veterans. Among many other national military cemeteries, we have many cemeteries in the United States that are national military cemeteries all over the country. And of interest for those who are curious, just close by here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, at the U.S. Army War College, we also have a cemetery, which is where students at the Carlisle Indian School who passed away from rubella, measles, mumps, whatever it was, pneumonia, but those who passed away when they were attending the Indian School here are buried there. Now, when relatives request that the remains be repatriated, they do a dignified ceremony, and the U.S. Army removes those remains and then returns them in a dignified manner to folks, whether they live out in Wyoming or Idaho or the Dakotas or somewhere like that. They return the remains of their loved ones. That happens periodically since I've been here. It's happened at least 3 times I can recall. But we have a cemetery which is located near the main entrance, the Clarendon Gate of the Army War College, which is a place where Native Americans are buried who were here attending school. Now, the interesting thing for me is that those who are buried there, the U.S. Army and U.S. government maintains that in a dignified manner, a beautiful small cemetery, into perpetuity. As long as there's the United States, that will be maintained. So it's fascinating the respect that's paid. But the gravestones are shaped in the exact same manner that you see there for Arlington. They just have the names. So you'll see something like Joanna Little Crow, Sue, born this date, died 1903. And you'll find those there. So that's quite amazing stuff, folks. Carlisle Barracks here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania has some interesting historic sites. I wouldn't recommend a trip coming here just for that, for the cemetery or for historic sites. But if you're in central Pennsylvania, I highly recommend a visit to Carlisle to see the U.S. Army History and Education Center, which houses many of our historic uniforms, memorabilia, documents, and primary source documents from the U.S. Army are located here at the War College. And they have static displays of our different conflicts, tributes to soldiers. It's quite a fascinating event. It's open to the public. You can go online, check it out anytime you like. The U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center, AHEC, and you can find that online. And then also you can pay a visit to the Army War College, the barracks where we're at. And you'll see some of our historic buildings that are there. The ones that were rebuilt after the Confederate Army burned Carlisle Barracks to the ground. During the Civil War, the Confederate Army, its troops advanced as far as Carlisle Barracks in force for the troops that were out ahead of the main force moving on Gettysburg, moving towards Gettysburg. They were coming north towards Harrisburg when Lee decided to engage at Gettysburg. That's where the battle took place. The units that were here burned the barracks, shelled the city of Carlisle, and then retreated back down past Boiling Springs and back through the mountain pass to get to Carlisle, or to Gettysburg, to rejoin the fight. Meanwhile, Jeb Stuart's cavalry was located to the east and northeast of that location, and actually raided the town that I live in, Dillsburg, Pennsylvania. Jeb Stuart's cavalry came here. They raided the post office and the local merchant and took things from them, gave them IOUs to pay them back for the provisions that they took. Of course, they never repaid them because they didn't win the war. And so Jeb Stuart's cavalry came through Dillsburg, and there's actually a historical monument or marker here in Dillsburg to commemorate their arrival here. So one more thing I'd like to put up on here very quickly, and this is from 1900. And you can see already by the year 1900, not too long after the American Civil War, folks were celebrating Decoration Day, which later became Memorial Day. But this is in 1900. And that is a small group of kids who've gone to recognize their uncle who died in the conflict. And so there you go. That's quite a while ago. It's over a century, 120 years ago, and it was already an established holiday for the country. But not until 1967 did Memorial Day become a federal holiday, and it wasn't actually implemented until 1971. Since that time, the last Monday of every month is dedicated as Memorial Day here in the United States, where we recognize those who have fallen and we mourn for them across the country. And many family members and relatives will return to our grave sites, which are not located simply in military cemeteries, but also those who've fallen many times are in family cemeteries or in local cemeteries where they're from. So folks will go back and place flags or poppies on their gravestones to recognize them. So yeah, um, that's a little bit about Memorial Day. Again, it's just one of the three holidays that recognize military here in this country, the other two being Veterans Day, which is November 11th of each year. The date is set. That's also the date that the armistice took effect for the First World War, so it coincides with that. But again, as I mentioned, for most of the Commonwealth countries, that date is actually Remembrance Day, not Veterans Day. So they remember those who've fallen as we do today here in the U.S. on the last Monday in May. And again, as I mentioned, it's also the informal start of the summer holiday season. Of course, the back end of that, the end of the summer holiday season is Labor Day. Now, here in America, we just sort of do things differently. Labor Day in much of the world is May 1st, May Day, right? Especially for socialists and communists. But around the world, the 1st of May, people celebrate labor and those who labor to earn a living. In the United States, we celebrate labor in the first week of September, the first Monday of September, I believe it is. So what happens is that our date's a little bit different. But Memorial Day at the end of May starts summer season unofficially, and then Labor Day, the first week of September, unofficially ends it. And that, of course, is the date that students have returned to school, universities have reopened, and it is also a long weekend, a 3-day weekend, although for many people in the military, it gets to be a 4-day weekend, which works out pretty well. So Veterans Day, as I mentioned, and then, of course, the other holiday that I've left out here is Armed Forces Day, which for me, for the first time since I entered the Army in 1983, this will be the first year that I'm out of uniform and not a serving member of the U.S. military. So it wasn't for me because Armed Forces Day recognizes those who are currently serving, which is no longer me. But Veterans Day, which we just went through in November, recognizes all the veterans, and I'm included in that number. And then, of course, today's Memorial Day, where we recognize those who've fallen for us in combat. So, yeah, there you have it, folks. A little bit about Memorial Day. I just want to share that with everybody today. The idea is that folks will go to grave sites on this day and leave flowers and recognize their loved ones and their kin who've given the ultimate sacrifice in defense of the nation. What's interesting, though, is that even a century ago, in 1900, when this cartoon comes from, even back then, it was already common for many veterans to be a bit out of sorts about the way that Decoration Day, or what became a Memorial Day, was celebrated, because it had become already a holiday for people as an excuse to get out and travel and have picnics and barbecues and things like that. So even over a century ago, people were already saying that this is not what the holiday is about. Well, I have no objection to people enjoying it at the beginning of the summer. I just hope that people on the actual day, because we've had a long weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, but on the actual day that's celebrated today, Memorial Day, that people take a moment. And that's why we have a congressional act that in 2000 asked people to take a moment at 3 p.m. to take a moment of silence to recognize those who've fallen in the country. And I think that that's really an appropriate step, and it's not too much for people to ask to remember that. It's interesting how holidays get changed over time and their purpose is adapted, particularly for commerce, but how it's changed and adapted. It's like Christmas. Christmas is a Christian holiday to celebrate the birth of Christ. But of course, we know about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman and Father Christmas and a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with the birth of Christ. And I'm not complaining about those things. I adore the traditions of Christmas, both the Christian and the secular versions of it. But it's important for people to remember it's not simply a secular holiday, it's a Christian holiday as well, and that's its origins. So the same with Memorial Day. It is not simply a date for people to pull out the charcoal and stick a piece of chicken or a steak on the grill, put on the flip-flops, jump in the pool, go down to the beach. It is all those things, but it's also a solemn time, and I just ask for folks to take a moment and recognize and pay attention to those who've given the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I think it's important to do that, and so that's kind of why I did this stream today. I could have done a stream today on the Africa Day, and maybe I'll make a video tonight about Africa Day. I think I'll do that. That's probably a good idea, maybe after this stream. And the purpose of doing that would be, of course, to talk about the significance of this day for African states, and I think that's reasonable. But again, I want to do this stream today to recognize Memorial Day. I've never done something like this before because for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is I haven't had my channel up and going. But now that I have my channel up and going, I thought that would be an important day to do this and share this with you. But if you take a look at the number of conflicts we've been involved in, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, the Dakota War of 1862, the Snake Indian War, Red Cloud's War, Korea, the Great Sioux War, the Nez Perce War, the Ute War. You see a lot of these with Native Americans. Spanish-American War of 1898, the Philippine-American War insurrection, which lasted for 15 years, from 1898 to 1913, the Boxer Rebellion. We even lost American service members in the Boxer Rebellion in China, the Santo Domingo Affair, the occupation of Nicaragua. We were there 3 times, 1910, 1912 to 25, 27 to 33. The Mexican Revolution, we actually lost people in that because General Pershing crossed over chasing Pancho Villa. The occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 34, World War I, the Russia campaign, the American Expeditionary Force in Siberia. We lost 160 soldiers there. Again in China, World War II, Berlin blockade, the Greek Civil War, we even lost service members there, the Korean War, and of course the Cold War. The list goes on and on. The number of conflicts is simply astounding. But we have lost officially 666,441 plus service members who've died serving our nation in conflict. And as I mentioned, the highest number of those was about 755,000 in the American Civil War from 1861 to 1865, out of a population of just over 31 million Americans. That works out to almost 2.4% of our population, and that would make it the highest percentage ever, the Civil War, the most bloody conflict in our history. For those who are curious, where does the Iraq conflict from 2003 to 2011 and, say, the war in Afghanistan rate? Well, the Iraq War 2003 to 2011 resulted thus far in 4,500, well, not thus far, but then 4,576 deaths to service members, or 2 per day during the conflict. That's for a country of nearly 300 million at that stage, 294 million. The war in Afghanistan from 2001, which continues to this day, we've lost 2,216 service members, and it ranks 12th. So Iraq is 9th in fallen, and Afghanistan is 12th. Those are for modern conflicts. So I thought that I should share that with you guys a little bit there. Joe says, do you miss serving? Absolutely, Joe. Listen, I'm not crestfallen. I don't like wake up in tears, and I miss being in uniform. I don't, but I do miss serving, absolutely. And I always knew that I would. When I got in the Army in 1987 to go back to university after serving 3.5 years on active duty, I had to hand over my ID card, and I gave it to them, and they gave me a reserve ID card, and I'm like, what's this? I don't want this. I want that green one. Already it was, after just 3.5 years of service, I realized that I was leaving something special. Serving in uniform is a distinct privilege. It's an honor to have the opportunity to do it. Now, not everybody takes it quite as seriously as that, but I've always taken that seriously, and I always knew that you can only do it for so long. I was very fortunate and amazingly fortunate to be able to serve for 36.5 years. And I did so at great personal expense. What I mean by that is not, mental, physical stress. All those things are real, or separations, things like that. But what I mean is that I really passed up a lot of money. I left a lot of money on the table on more than one occasion to do exciting things in different fields to pursue. But I want to stay for a number of reasons, and I have no regrets, and I do miss it. I do. Now, if you look at this, maybe I don't miss shaving every day, but this won't be here much longer. But yeah, I do miss serving. What I miss the most about it is I really enjoyed being part of our nation's defense and defending our liberties and freedoms, even when I didn't agree with things that my government was doing. As long as they were legal, ethical, and moral, I did them, even if I disagree with the policy. But I do miss serving and being able to walk around and say I'm in the Army. I do kind of miss that. But it's not. It didn't define me. For some people, it's very difficult for them to no longer serve. It's really such a key part of their personal identity that they have a hard time coming to grips with not serving. That's not the case for me. I kind of miss it, but I'll survive. But I'm a veteran, and I always have that. Yeah, I do miss being part of the military, Joe. The day you turned 18 was the day you went to do your duty to the country. I think that might have been about maybe people were drafted or something. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, Nicholas says, yeah, he's talking about his service. Yeah, an accelerated lesson in Afrikaans. Yes, for those who don't know, Nicholas was served in the South African Defense Force, and in those days, your drill was done in Afrikaans, which for English-speaking white South Africans was a bit of a shock when they went in uniform because they got yelled at in Afrikaans, and it's difficult enough to be yelled at and by a drill sergeant and being forced to do push-ups or other things. But when they're doing it in a language that's foreign or alien to you, that you've not spent much effort trying to learn, or didn't want to learn or just are unfamiliar with, it's quite a shock. Similar situation when I was in Botswana and the first cohort of women to join the Botswana Defense Force. The Botswana Defense Force wasn't prepared to actually train them and receive them, but the president had gotten tired of the military dragging its feet and said, "You will make this happen." Or not the president, excuse me, the chief of the Defense Force had said, "I'm tired of this." General Masiri said, "You will make this happen." And so they had to do what the general said. And so they went out and they worked to deal with Tanzania, and all of the female recruits, many of whom were professionals, you had some lawyers and businesswomen who were very successful, left their business to go into the military to be the first to serve as women in the BDF. Many of them were professionals, I said, but they were sent to Tanzania. And of course, the official language in Tanzania is Swahili. Nobody in Botswana speaks Swahili. It's not even remotely related, other than the fact it's also a Bantu language. So they were sent there, and they were getting yelled at by drill instructors in a language they don't speak a word of. So I can empathize with Nicholas and his experience in Afrikaans. At least he probably had some familiarity with the language when he was serving in the South African Defense Force, the pre-SANDF, the SADF. But anyway, yeah, so that can be a bit of a challenge for those who are serving uniform when it's in another language. Paulie asked a question, let me go back to Joe's thing here. Let me jump back here. Sorry, I missed a few. Hank, great initiative, Colonel, and speaking highly of this fall. Well, thank you, Hank. It's my privilege. Those who have given their life deserve our respect. They have not come home, and they've not returned to their loved ones. In many cases, they never had a chance to produce progeny, and so their line may have ended with them, and they've paid an ultimate sacrifice. No matter the fashion they died in serving our country or who they were personally, their time on this earth ended as a consequence of wearing the uniform and protecting our liberties, home and abroad. So yeah, they deserve our respect, whoever they were, and it's my distinct pleasure to be able to do this today, and I'm so glad that some of you were able to tune in and listen to this. Hank said, or Joe says, "Thank you for the stream. I'm glad you did it. Great explanation." Well, thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure. Paulie, do you think that the number of private contractors in both Iraq and Afghanistan has helped keep the numbers down, particularly in Iraq? Do you mean the numbers of casualties or the numbers of troops deployed? It's certainly helped the troops deployed, and likely it may have helped in casualties because soldiers are able to focus on the combat and the security missions more clearly than in the support functions that these contractors provide, whether it's security or it's dining, hall running, or whatever it is. Having the contractors can be a combat multiplier for a military to allow them to put their combat power elsewhere where it's more needed, and the better focus you have on the combat power and the mission at hand, and less distractions from the things contractors are handling in the background for you, then arguably you probably have fewer casualties. Just one example. Hank says Tupi. Yep, exactly how it was. Yep, Nicholas, it was just like that. I'm sure it was certainly a challenge for English speakers to be getting basic training in Afrikaans, no doubt. Yes. Again, so the poppies up there, as I mentioned, that is a consequence of, after the Second Battle of Ypres, I speak French, but I can never pronounce his Belgian names properly, Ypres or Yipes. Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a physician with the Canadian Expeditionary Forces, famously wrote a poem after the second battle there in 1950, which was called "In Flanders Fields." And for those who've ever heard it recited, I didn't want to recite it here because I thought it was a little bit hokey, but "In Flanders Fields" is an amazing poem, and he brings to mind images of the field of poppies around soldiers' graves. That inspired a YWCA worker, Moina Michael, in 1918 to wear a poppy on her coat lapel, and she took a couple dozen of them with her to the overseas YWCA War Secretaries Conference, and she passed them around, and everybody suddenly was wearing poppies, and it was to recognize the fallen. So in 1920, the National American Legion, a veterans association here in the United States, adopted it as their official symbol of remembrance. So since 1920, it's officially been a symbol that we've used here in the United States to recognize those who've fallen for Memorial Day. In Commonwealth countries, the poppy is worn on Remembrance Day, the 11th of November, which is Veterans Day here. We also wear it for that date. But it is really to recognize those who passed away. It's quite a wonderful tribute to those who've died in uniform and in service. It's quite something, and we shouldn't forget, we're talking about Memorial Day today too, but let me stretch it a little bit further and not forget, I've already mentioned the prisoners of war and missing in action, nearly 82,000 Americans. But this is a similar situation around the planet for those who serve in uniform for all their countries. And although today is Memorial Day for Americans, I ask that people think for a moment, wherever you live, If you live in New Zealand or Australia, think about the Anzac forces in Gallipoli, the losses that took place there, the service of your service members in Papua New Guinea and other places who've contributed to the defense of Western civilization and of individual freedoms and liberties in our liberal democracies. For South Africans who served in the First World War, hunting down Colonel Paul Letto von Voorbeck in the German East Africa Force in Tanganyika, or those who served with Jan Christian Smuts in German Southwest Africa and defeated the German Schutztruppe there and took over Southwest Africa, or the South Africans and Rhodesians who fought in the Second World War in Europe as pilots and in other parts of the world and special operators. To all of them, remember that if you are from another country, say in Europe or Africa or around the world, think for a moment about those who serve in uniform, many of whom in the past didn't do so voluntarily. They were drafted. That was just a requirement for young men, or those who did volunteer. Think of them for a moment because they gave up something that they can't get back. We can lose a limb, we can lose a part of ourselves in conflict, and many do, unfortunately. But when you lose life, there's nothing to come back. You don't bring back. So that's what Memorial Day is about. And I don't mean to be morose, and I don't want to bring people down. I just wanted to share this with people today. I really would like to talk about South Africa and the easing of the lockdown restrictions in Botswana and maybe Uganda and things like that. It is Africa Day, and maybe I might do a short stream, or I'll certainly do a video about Africa Day later today. But given that it'll be too late for people in Africa, I'm not so sure I want to do another stream, but I'll think about it. But I did want to do this, and let me just run through these numbers again, just to point this out so people remember this here. Hey, Mike, great talk today. Need to break contact, go to the cemeteries here in Carlisle. Well, hey, thanks, Mike. I didn't realize you were there all that time. Thank you for being here. Mike Morrow is a colleague of mine, an amazing, I'm going to embarrass him now before he runs off. Mike Morrow is an amazing leader and a fantastic instructor. Really enjoyed working with him at the War College. The only shortcoming with Mike is he's an Air Force veteran. So the Air Force is a little bit suspicious, but no. No, Mike is a top drawer, and I hope I'm not embarrassing him. Well, I hope I am embarrassing him because he's really good. Students at the War College are very fortunate to have him as instructor. He's really top drawer material. But Mike is leaving now to go to the cemetery there in Carlisle to recognize those folks. Thanks. Fantastic, Mike. Thanks for joining the stream. I'm really glad you were able to be here. Hopefully we can do some stuff together soon at the War College if this hysteria over the lockdown ends. But let me just run through just a moment again for folks. Those who've fallen for America in our conflicts. The Civil War, 755,000 estimated, nearly 2.4% of our entire population of 31.5 million people then. Second World War comes next with 405,399 fatalities. The First World War with 116,516. Vietnam, 58,209. The Korean War, 36,574. And the American Revolution is sixth on our list of conflicts with those who have fallen. 25,000 of the 2.5 million Americans died in that conflict. So a bit solemn. It is interesting how we deal with these different things. I'm sorry, I already had that up there already. I was going to bring up a picture I'd had, but I already had that one again. So Poppy's banner's there. Yeah, again, so are there any questions before we break off here shortly? If not, I'm going to cut off in about 7 minutes, but I do want to see, Paulie says, number of casualties, talking about keeping soldier deaths down due to private contractors. Paulie, I don't know that we can make the argument that private contractors reduced soldier fatalities. I think that we can argue the case that fatalities would be even lower if it hadn't been for the asymmetric efforts that the enemy employed in Iraq and Afghanistan. For instance, improvised explosives devices, which is not a normal part of conflict, but it has become that asymmetric approach to it, caused many of the fatalities that we had in conflict in Iraq. But I think that the tremendous advancements in communications and weaponry, satellite information, global positioning systems, precise munitions or laser-guided munitions, all of those things, better intelligence capacity, all of those have contributed to reducing the number of fatalities in combat. You can never get them to zero, unfortunately, because enemies don't need much in the way of technology to overcome your technology. But those things make it easier for us to be more lethal in the right place at the right time and also to reduce battlefield casualties. So I think that probably plays a far bigger role than the use of private contractors. Anyway, so I think that's kind of... Mark Gardner says Allied soldiers during World War I used to call it Whippers. Okay, yeah, yippers, yippers. Yeah, I think yippers is actually the correct pronunciation. Mark, thank you. Enough of the lockdown. We celebrate with Colonel White today. Well, thank you, Hank. Yeah, screw lockdown. Let's talk about celebrating those who served their nation and given up their lives. Um, Wesley says, thanks for the stream. Something different for a change, variety is spice of life after all. After all, Memorial Day, Moderate says Memorial Day in the States, love South Africa. Yeah, again, folks, it can't always be the lockdown. It can't always be like if you're from South Africa, which a lot of the folks on the stream are right now. It can't always be whinging about the ANC and governance and all those things. Those things all matter. They're very important. But we have to take a moment every now and then to step back and appreciate life and appreciate those around us and the world we're in. Otherwise, it'll pass by and we will have not enjoyed it and had a miserable existence. Let's have the best existence we can despite the misery and chaos around us. Make the best of it each and every day. If you're in South Africa, I encourage you now that you can actually see your neighbors and get within reasonable social distancing of them, have a braai. Invite friends and family over if you're able to. Crack open. I recommend South African wines, but you can't buy them. Yeah, you can buy them starting June 1st. So don't get in trouble today. Wait another week until June 1st and go out and have yourself a braai in South Africa and celebrate the fact that you're still alive after the events there. And for those of us here in the United States, as we start the unofficial beginning of the summer season here with Memorial Day weekend, please maintain your social distancing and get out and see family and friends, especially those who've been cloistered away, the elderly, your parents, your grandparents who may have been isolated. For those who are divorced or going through a divorce and you've not been able to see your children because you've been constrained or constricted or confined to a particular location because of lockdown, use the first chance you get to safely go about seeing those friends and family and see your kids if you've not been able to see them. It's important to get out and about and see folks for people's mental welfare and their health. It's something that's been overlooked by authorities in their callous imposition of these lockdowns and the damage they've done. But yeah, so Memorial Day here in the United States 2020. I want to thank you guys for coming in today. I hope you've enjoyed this, a little bit of the history of Memorial Day, why we call it Memorial Day, when it was created, the purpose of it. Also to point out that there are many origin myths to this, but I did give you one of the most reliable stories, and that is from 1868 when General John Logan, the serving president of the Grand Army of the Republic. You should look that up. It's kind of cool. My great-great-grandfather was a member, served in the Maryland 9th Infantry Regiment, and he was a member, also a prisoner at Andersonville, a concentration camp for prisoners, essentially, in which a seriously high number of inmates died there due to the sanitary conditions. It was the only execution that took place after the war. The trial of the commander of Andersonville, who was a German immigrant, was executed for running that camp. But my great-great-grandfather was a prisoner at Andersonville, and he did survive, although he did get scurvy when he was at Andersonville. I made a pension claim for it later on, which I was able to find in my genealogical research. But he served in the Grand Army of the Republic. He's buried in a cemetery in Baltimore. And in that cemetery, his gravestone has the Grand Army of the Republic symbol on his gravestone, as many Union veterans had on their gravestones. Yeah, so Charles Coleman is his name, and he was my great-great-grandfather, served in the American Civil War. In fact, for that matter, for those who are curious, I have 7 great-grandfathers who served in the American Civil War. And if you are curious, every single one of them served in a Union regiment. They fought to preserve the Union, and several of them were from Maryland. William Bear Grimes, Charles Coleman were from Maryland, along with a few others, and then the rest came from West Virginia, who were my grandfathers, those 7. And so all of them served in Union regiments, and some of them served with quite distinction, and in fact, including William Bear Grimes, my great-great-grandfather, who was from Frederick County, Maryland, near Ladysburg. He served in Maryland's 7th Infantry Regiment along with his brother, and he was involved in 30 major engagements as a soldier during the Civil War. Some really famous battles, and in one of the battles, I think it might have been Cold Harbor or somewhere like that, he was interviewed for a book that was being written in the late 19th or the early part of the 20th century, and he was interviewed and he was asked about his experiences. He talked about when he was marching in battle in formation towards the Confederate lines. The Confederates fired a volley, and the soldier on his left and the soldier on his right both took musket balls right in the head and dropped dead right there, and the formation continued forward. And but for a matter of inches, I wouldn't be here today. And of course, that story continues over various lines. If we all look back in the history of humankind, someone that didn't do something or some event that might have happened a couple seconds later, or a battle, we might have lost someone, and you wouldn't be here in the form that you are today. So I always take great heartening in the fact that my great-great-grandfather survived his travails in the Civil War fighting for the Union. But all seven of them fought for the Union, and a few of them were members of the Grand Army of the Republic, which I mentioned. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what else we got here. Dietrich says, Happy Memorial Day to all the men in uniform. Well, thank you for that, Dietrich, but it's Memorial Day is for those who passed away, so that's what we're celebrating today. For those in uniform, that would be Armed Forces Day, which is in May, but earlier this month we celebrate Armed Forces Day for those currently serving, and Veterans Day for all veterans, whether they're a one-term veteran, a combat veteran, or a retiree veteran. All veterans we celebrate on November 11th each and every year. But Memorial Day is the last Monday of every May, and that recognizes and honors those who've fallen in service to our nation. And that's what today's all about. So thank you guys for that. Hank says, last question, any medals, Colonel? Any medals for me? Yeah, I've got a whole chest full of medals. I'm not boasting, but I got a lot of medals. Maybe I'll put that photograph up another time. I don't think I have one handy. Let me look and see real quick if I have one on my laptop here before we go away that has my, oh yeah, there's one. Okay, so let me do that. I will bring this photo up since Hank asked the question. This is not shameless self-promotion. It's in response to a request for self-promotion. No, I'm just kidding. So let me do this, and then I'll put this up, and you guys can see this, because I realize that not everybody has seen my stuff. So I need to go to pictures, I think it is. There we go. This is a photograph of me recently at the Army War College graduation ceremony last year. So let me shrink this down. So those are ribbons and decorations that I wear in my uniform. Should show us your medals. Yeah, I am showing the medals, General Inflatables. There you go. Hey, Dog Breaker. Thank you for the Happy Memorial Day greetings. So there you go. There's a picture of me from last year, and that's me at the Army War College. We do the graduation ceremony. In fact, you see some lady in the background on the left-hand side of the photograph there who's calling someone. There's a lot of people around, and I usually stand in front of flags and get a picture or two. And of course, that's me without the Father Christmas look. But I'm standing in front of the flag of Botswana because I was there with a student from Botswana who was one of my students and special affinity for Botswana. So on that uniform, just very quickly before I close out this stream, thank you, General Inflatables, for a happy Memorial Day greeting. Before we close out, let me explain here. So on my chest, looking at on the left-hand side, you'll see a little symbol, which is my regimental affiliation, that's military intelligence, and below that are two ribbons. And on that side of your uniform in the Army, you wear your unit awards. So these are not individual awards. I have several of them, but there are two ribbons there. One has multiple. So there's a Valorous Unit Award, and that's for valorous action in combat against the enemy. And that was from my time serving in the 3rd Battalion, 8th Cavalry of the 3rd Armored Division, 2nd Brigade of 3rd Armored Division in Gelnhausen, Germany. We fought in the Gulf War. That is the Valorous Unit Award. And anyone who is assigned to that unit, when the President awards the unit, that award wears it for the rest of their life. If you later are assigned to that unit that still exists, and it had previously been designated for that, you will wear the award for that unit on the temporary basis while you're assigned to it. That way, the unit is recognized and the individual is recognized. That's into perpetuity. And then the other one is the presidential citation that I got when I worked at U.S. Africa Command for actions in Africa. That were awarded, also one for the Defense Intelligence Agency and another for the National Security Agency, each of which, when I was assigned there, received an award for things that we did during the global war on terrorism. So that's, yeah, Josie's going to miss the beard. I don't know if I'm going to miss it, although it's something interesting. So then, of course, my name tape is below that, and then below that is on this uniform. We used to wear the green uniform, and we would sew on the shoulder, on the right shoulder, the unit that you served in combat with. Now, in the Army, you're given a choice. Some people put the first unit they ever served in combat with. Some put the last, some put their favorite unit. It's a personal choice, but any unit you served in combat with on a combat tour, you can wear the patch there. When we switched to the blue uniform like this, we no longer sewed patches on the sleeve, so because we had the combat patch on the right if you served in combat, and on the left-hand shoulder, you would have your current unit of assignment patch sewn there. On the blue uniform, we don't sew those patches on, so the way we recognize combat is on that left-hand side of the breast. You see in the photograph there, below the pocket is the unit you served. And that was the first unit I ever served in combat with. That was in the 3rd Armored Division. So I wear that combat patch for the 3rd Armored Division as a metal badge on that uniform. On the other side, you see a whole host of ribbons. I think I have 21 different ribbons there. Some of them are just, I was here and I was part of the team, I get it. And others are for excellence and others are performance. And then in the center of my uniform, you see two things on the collar, and that is the military intelligence brass. And if you watch television, the original Battlestar Galactica, you'll see that that was the stuff that the pilots wore for the Vipers. The Viper pilots in Battlestar Galactica wore that brass. For some reason, Hollywood took military intelligence brass because it looked really cool. It was like a little dagger on top of a rose with blue, and they put Oriental blue, and they put that on there for the Viper pilots. So I guess I could star in Battlestar Galactica because I too was a Viper pilot with my military intelligence brass. And then above that, all officers wear the U.S. to show that we're U.S. Above my ribbons, you see the Air Assault badge, which was awarded to me for completion of that training. I won't go into detail for those ribbons, but there's a lot of them. Not a boast, just you can count them there. That doesn't mean I'm great and wonderful. It just means that I work for some good people at certain times who recognized performance and made sure that awards were given for it. So not every leader is good in that respect, and many soldiers who deserve awards never get them. Some that don't deserve awards get the ones they shouldn't get, and so I won't go into detail on that. But I'm not coming from a point of bitterness. I certainly received a number of citations during my service in uniform, so no objections there. Jorah, thank you for strewing your virtual poppies today. We will remember. You're welcome. Polly says, salute. I'm sure also a few, so. Okay, she show us your medals. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I've gone a little bit over 1 hour, and while I've still got a good audience here, let me do this. I didn't want to continue any further. I did want to talk about let me do this. Take that off because I'm self-conscious about that. Make myself bigger here. I will now open it up for a few minutes if there's interest in this, and I will answer any questions about Africa Day, or if you want to talk about South Africa, if you want to talk about Canada's lousy rugby team. No, sorry, Ken, I'm just picking on you. But let me open up for a few minutes rather than just cancel the stream and end it right there. Oh, you're in Bloemfontein. Excellent. Well, speaking of Bloemfontein, now that I've finished the portion about Memorial Day, then I have no trouble doing this. So let me put this up on there. So while I wait for any questions to come up, let me put that up. I'll take the poppies. Hang on a second here. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. So Shink Art, okay. There we go. Let me take the poppies off there so that we're off the Memorial Day thing and get back to the Shink Art. So let me answer. There we go. So I'll open this up if there's any questions. If not, then I'll drop off here shortly. But so once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you like that character that I usually use on my website or my YouTube channel, that is courtesy of Shink Art, and Shink is based in Bloemfontein, and that's Jorah Vian is from Bloemfontein. So it just brought it to my attention. So I decided to put that up there. This is a caricature of me, and yes, my calves and thighs are that muscular, but my head's not that big. Anyway, so I'm in good company as they've done these characters for other folks, including famous people like Sio Khaleesi, the captain of the world champion, William Webb Ellis Trophy champion, Rugby World Cup champion, Springboks. And then also Joe Black, South Africa's incredibly talented singer who just recently shaved his beard off. But anyway, so Shink made that for me, and I just want to share that with you. You should check them out. They do photography for weddings and also family photography. So Shink Art, so shink.co.za, or if I get this correctly in Afrikaans, which I'll probably butcher, Shink Pinco Pinza. Anyway, so that wasn't very good Afrikaans, but yeah, please check them out. Shink does an amazing job, and you'll be happy you checked them out. If you want to get a character, make a gift for a family member or friend to celebrate something, or graduating from school or something like that, or some successful thing. But check them out. That's a local business there. Wesley says, did the American Armed Forces have any part in the Angolan conflict? No, we didn't, but the U.S. government did. The CIA did. They backed Holden Roberto and the FNLA at the outset of the conflict in Angola. The CIA provided material and financial support to Holden Roberto in his silly invasion from the DRC with 8,000 troops, in which the MPLA spanked them and their soldiers were ineffective. We backed the wrong horse. We should have backed either the MPLA, which we weren't going to do because they were socialist and communist, or Jonas Savimbi from the outset. We didn't do that. We backed Holden Roberto, and the rest is history. He just passed away recently, too, not that long ago. So, yeah. My marriage buddy says, no battle of BTC or Camp Ware ribbons. For those who don't know, this is one of my colleagues who was with me in Liberia. And is the BTC is the Barclay Training Center, or Camp Ware is Camp Sandy S. Ware, which is where we did basic training for the new Armed Forces of Liberia. No, I don't have any ribbons for that. I take into war for Liberia, but it just it was a defense um, Meritorious Service Award. So anyway, DMSN. Starbucks stuck in. No, I don't have Starbucks advertising deal. And by the way, I don't have any advertising deals with any of the folks whose stuff I'm promoting on here, at least not yet. And I'm not looking for money from these folks. I'm trying to help South African businesses survive the consequences of this nonsense and this hysteria. And these are businesses that I have some sort of relationship with, or I've worked with, or who've been helpful. In the case of Shink, I was referred to them from Johan Orton, who's a South African photojournalist that covers rugby and cricket, and I've known him for a few years over LinkedIn. Johan showed me his character after the World Cup. I'm like that, and his is really cool. He's a photographer, so his character, he's got his big smile, and he's carrying these huge cameras, those big lenses, telescopic, hanging off his hip, and a camera bag on one side, and it's really cool, and a tripod, I think. So I was like, wow, I want to get one of those, and so I eventually got around to commissioning, and so that's how I found out about Shink Art, and I didn't even know they were in Bloemfontein until after I'd ordered my character, and I paid for my character. It wasn't simply free. So let me bring that back up because I'm talking about characters. So now that we've gone off Memorial Day, there's my character from the Rugby World Cup for those who aren't familiar with it. And that's something that's done by Shink Art. So I'm happy to do. Oh, Doggaboy, you are really late, my friend. You came in very late. Actually, we were supposed to end 10 minutes ago. And as usual, I run over. I guess I don't know when to stop, but yeah, so I'm just doing these advertisements to help folks out. So along those lines, that was Shink Art that I put up. But also, now I have it, but I don't know if I saved it here yet. Let me see if I saved it here because I got this earlier. No, I don't, so I apologize. But this is from Talon, and I pronounce his last name wrong in Afrikaans, Bezidenhout. I get his name wrong, but he has a company called Impulse Graphics. And Impulse Graphics, those are the guys who, well, he's the guy that made my intro and outro videos that I used. If you watch my video this morning, talking about, which one did I do this morning? Was it South Africa? Yes, it was South Africa, talking about President Ramaphosa's, it appeared today. I recorded last night. So President Ramaphosa's remarks about lockdown. In that, I have an intro and an outro video, and that was courtesy of Talon Ziedenhout, who has a graphics company called Impulse Graphics, and I will put up his details next time and provide that free of charge. So my thanks to Talon for those wonderful graphics. More talent than I have when it comes to creating things, so I really appreciate that. And he did that out of the goodness of his heart, so very kind of Talon to share that with me. And then the last one I want to throw up here is this once again. For those who don't recall, this is Giselle, a Namibian singer who I'm a big fan of, and especially if not just for her music, but the fact that her manager and Giselle asked if they could stream their album debut on my channel on YouTube, which we did on the May 8th, and it's still available under my recent streams. If you look up this, it's an hour and 3 minutes. You can listen to her folk music, her country music in English and Afrikaans, and her Afrikaans pop. You got to check it out. The good news is that Giselle's concert on my site is still getting a lot of views. I appreciate that, but if you've not seen it, you owe it to yourself to go watch it. And you can't beat the price, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely free. So there is some unsolicited, unpaid for advertising for Shink Art, for Impulse Graphics, and also for Giselle. So anyway, folks, her music is amazing. A lot of folks on here have watched already. If you haven't, or if you're new to the stream, go check it out. So there you go. Let's see. What else we got here? Have you ever had a brother in the Army go AWOL, Chris? No, my brother served in the Ohio National Guard, one of my brothers, and he never went AWOL. No, he did his duty. Actually, his big job when he was in the Ohio Guard was he was a crew chief on helicopters, and their mission when they did their activation in the summertime for 2 weeks, and then when they were called up weekend drills, is they went around Ohio in the summertime looking for marijuana fields and hunting them down based on intelligence from the law enforcement and from the intelligence people, and they would hunt down and find the marijuana plants, and they would burn them. Now, I don't know if they stood downwind of them when they burned them, but their job was to burn marijuana plants. So my brother actually used to burn pot, and this is kind of ironic and hilarious now in today's world where people are bending over backwards to make marijuana legal. His job was to destroy it for a long time. So that's what my brother did in the Ohio Air National Guard, or Ohio Guard, not Air National Guard. But no, I've never had anyone in my family go absolutely without leave. Savimbi was brutally butchered years after the border war. Well, Savimbi was tracked down courtesy of the Israelis providing drones to the MPLA, and they finally hunted him down the bush. But my sympathy for Jonas Savimbi disappeared rapidly in the early 1990s. In 1992, the Western powers negotiated a peace finally between the MPLA and UNITA, the Union for Total Independence of Angola. And so, whereas MPLA is a popular movement for the liberation of Angola. So two movements that arose fighting the Portuguese and then fought each other along with the FLA, the Front for the National Liberation of Angola. Anyway, so the MPLA and Savimbi, they had elections in 1992. And to go back to, the U.S. military did go into Angola in 1992 with C-130s and other aircraft, and we airlifted former guerrillas and MPLA fighters and took them back to their home districts all over Angola, to remote, airstrips out in the bush, so people could vote. The vote was held. The MPLA won the election, and Jonas Savimbi immediately resorted to conflict and went back to civil war. And that, at that point, 1992, I'd been a staunch advocate of Jonas Savimbi for many years, but it became pretty clear to me that after that, not then at that moment, but not too long after that Jonas Savimbi didn't care about Angola. Jonas Savimbi cared about his ego, in my view. And when they finally got him in 2001 or 2002, they killed him in the bush with a drone. They found with a drone. I didn't shed many tears for Jonas Savimbi because he was causing untold heartache, and all this stuff about him being a great patriot really kind of fell by the wayside, I think. So let's see what else here. Your dad burned dog. I hope he didn't stand downwind. Click the like button, rate stream on the bell, select all notifications. Thanks a lot, Nicholas. I appreciate that. Let's see. MP in the border war, happy Memorial Day, thank you. Why did the Israelis work for the MPLA? Money. Money. It was an Israeli contractor that did it. I don't know that it was the Israeli government. It might have been, but I don't know the answer for that. All right, so Paulie's taking off. Yeah. It was just about money, man. That's what it was all about. So, yeah, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, listen, about an hour and 15 minutes into this, I think we got 22 folks on here. It's great, and I'd like to go longer, but I don't want to keep you if you got to take off, and I don't want to bore people. So give me your thoughts real quick. Should I go a little bit longer, go to 1:30, or should we kill it here? I think we just lost a couple people. So, yeah, Kyle's taking off. All right, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't I close it here? And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This was a Memorial Day stream to recognize those who've fallen in uniform for my country, the United States. Almost 670,000 Americans who've fallen in service of their nation in times of conflict around the world. So I just wanted to do this today on a more somber day, and also to not simply let people recognize the long weekend for barbecues and pools and bikinis and things like that and travel, but also to take a moment to recognize those who paid the ultimate price for us, for our freedoms. Our freedoms, which are under assault each and every day under COVID-19 lockdown restrictions imposed by hysterical leaders at all levels from governments around the world. But anyway, thank you for tuning into this today. I really appreciate you all being part of this with me. If you're not a subscriber and you just stumbled into this channel, please feel free to push that button down there and subscribe to this channel. Doesn't mean you have to watch the content, just means you'll find out about it. And then be sure to push that bell icon over there, as Nicholas has asked you to do in the chat there. That'll notify you in theory, but we know that YouTube is not particularly efficient at reminding people or telling them ahead of time about things. But please push that that button for notifications, and that way, in theory, you should get notified. I do a weekly live stream every Saturday at this point, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard, 4 o'clock in London and Abuja, or 5 o'clock in Gaborone and in Johannesburg. And that is a weekly interview. Last week we had, gosh, who did I have? Oh, I had Herman Roos on Saturday, who was a tobacco farmer in South Africa. The week before that, I had Ovigwe Eguigu, who is a Nigerian security specialist, talking about Nigeria and national security. And then before that, I had Evans Larrabee, who is a small-scale commercial farmer located in Ghana. So that's my regularly scheduled every Saturday live stream for the moment. But because it's locked down and people can't get around, a lot of people are socially isolated and looking for something to do. And YouTube gets old, as does Amazon Prime, and people run out of books to read. I, like many YouTubers now, am actually using my channel in some ways as kind of a public service to share with others and to answer questions and talk about personal experiences and political views and economics and things like that. So that's the second, that's what's going on here. And then the final thing to talk about is that I do prepared videos. Like this morning, I had my comments and remarks about President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement of lockdown lowered from level 4 to level 3 in South Africa. I do those frequently. I do those prepared videos. And in those prepared videos, I offer my political views, my analysis from my experience and my knowledge. I'm a political scientist, historian. Of course, I've done lots of things in uniform around the world. So I offer that. Anyway, so feel free to subscribe to the channel, and you can find out about all those things. And also, as Nicholas and a few others have pointed out, please, I ask you to smash that like button down there. Now, why is that? Is that for my ego? Nope, I don't need to inflate my ego. It can be full of hot air anytime I want it to be. But the like button truly does have an impact. The more likes that a video gets as a percentage of the people who viewed it, the more likely it is to be promoted when you log in. Say you go into YouTube and you come up and it shows you videos down there. The odds are more likely, if you're looking for something related to the topic that I talk about, which is quite a few topics, that my video might appear on there. And then you go, oh, who's this guy? I'm gonna check this out. Anyway, so that's why I asked for likes. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in on today, May 25th of 2020, Memorial Day here in the United States. I hope that you have a pleasant evening, if it's already evening for you in Africa or Europe. If you're in New Zealand, it's tomorrow already, so happy tomorrow. For those here in the U.S., thank you for tuning into my stream and enjoying and recognizing Memorial Day with me. Look forward to seeing you all on my channel again. Thank you so much for your time. And that's it, everybody. Have a pleasant one. Take